The March wind off Lake Huron cut through downtown Detroit as 24-year-old Marcus Johnson walked nervously toward the gleaming headquarters of Meridian Manufacturing, one of the largest automotive suppliers in the Midwest. He clutched his resume in one hand and his father's old lunch box in the other, a reminder of the blue-collar values that had shaped his upbringing. Marcus had been unemployed for 6 months since graduating with his engineering degree, a victim of the competitive job market that left even qualified candidates struggling to find opportunities. His savings were depleted, his student loans were mounting, and his pride was wearing thin from months of rejection letters. "You've got this, son," his father William had said that morning over coffee in their modest apartment. "Just be yourself and show them what you're capable of." William Johnson was 52 years old, a man whose hands showed the wear of decades of manual labor. He had worked various factory jobs throughout Marcus's childhood, always emphasizing the dignity of honest work and the importance of education. Now, at an age when most people were thinking about retirement, William was facing his own employment crisis after being laid off from his last manufacturing job 3 months earlier. Inside Meridian Manufacturing's impressive lobby, Marcus checked in with the receptionist and was directed to wait in a conference room with 5 other candidates for the entry-level engineering position. The competition was fierce. Each candidate had impressive credentials and the kind of polished presentation that came from privilege and preparation. Marcus Johnson called Jennifer Walsh, the HR director, a professional woman in her 40s who managed to be both authoritative and welcoming. Marcus followed Jennifer through corridors lined with awards and photographs documenting Meridian's 50-year history of innovation in automotive manufacturing. The company employed over 3,000 people and had weathered multiple economic downturns by adapting to changing market demands. "Tell me about yourself, Marcus," said Jennifer as they settled into her office. Marcus straightened his tie, the only one he owned, and began the speech he had practiced dozens of times. "I graduated magna cum laude from Wayne State with a degree in mechanical engineering. I've completed internships at 2 smaller manufacturers, and I'm passionate about sustainable manufacturing processes that can help Detroit remain competitive in the global market." Impressive credentials, Jennifer nodded. "But I have to ask, you've been unemployed for 6 months. What have you been doing during that time?" Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I've been applying for positions and working temporary jobs to pay rent. The market has been challenging." "What kind of temporary work?" "Warehouse, delivery, some construction. Whatever I could find to support myself while continuing my job search." Jennifer made notes, and Marcus couldn't tell if his honesty was helping or hurting his chances. In a competitive market, admitting to desperation felt like weakness, but lying felt worse. "Marcus, this position pays $65,000 annually with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. Why should Meridian choose you over candidates with more direct experience?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Because I understand this industry from the ground up. My father worked in manufacturing my entire life, and I grew up understanding that every innovation starts with someone who knows how things really work on the factory floor. I'm not just looking for any job. I want to build a career with a company that values both innovation and the people who make innovation possible." After the interview, Marcus sat in his car for several minutes, replaying every answer and wondering if he had done enough to stand out. The position would change his life: steady income, career growth, and the ability to start paying down his student loans and maybe even help his father, who was struggling with his own job search. That evening, Marcus returned to the small apartment he shared with his father in Detroit's improving, but still economically challenged East Side. William was reading the newspaper at their kitchen table, scanning the classified ads with the systematic attention of someone who had been unemployed before. "How did it go, son?" "I think it went well, but it's hard to tell. The competition was intense." William looked up from his newspaper. "You know, I've been thinking about what I want to do next. I'm tired of just applying for any job that will have me." "What do you mean?" "I mean I want to find work that means something. Maybe I'm too old to start over, but I'm not too old to contribute something valuable." Marcus felt a familiar pang of guilt about his father's situation. William had sacrificed his own ambitions to ensure Marcus could attend college, working extra shifts and side jobs to pay for tuition and books. Now, when William should be thinking about his own future, he was instead facing the challenge of finding employment in an economy that often overlooked older workers. "Dad, you're only 52. You're not too old for anything." "Maybe not, but I am too old to pretend that I want to work just for a paycheck. If I'm going to spend the next 15 years of my life at a job, I want it to be somewhere that I can make a real difference." The next morning brought unexpected news. Jennifer Walsh called to inform Marcus that while his interview had been impressive, the position had been offered to another candidate with more direct industry experience. However, Jennifer continued, "We were impressed enough with you that we'd like to offer you a temporary position in our manufacturing operations. It's not engineering work, but it would give you direct experience with our processes and potentially lead to permanent opportunities." Marcus felt his heart sink and soar. Simultaneously, it wasn't the engineering position he had hoped for, but it was a foot in the door at a respected company. What would the position involve? Assembly line work, quality control, general manufacturing support. The pay would be $18 per hour, and it would be a 6-month contract with the possibility of conversion to permanent employment. Marcus quickly calculated the numbers. At $18 per hour, he would earn barely enough to cover his basic expenses, with nothing left for student loan payments or helping his father. But it was work, and it was at a company where he might eventually find the career he was seeking. "I'll take it," Marcus said without hesitation. That afternoon, Marcus shared the news with his father, expecting disappointment about the low pay and temporary nature of the position. Instead, William smiled with genuine pride. "That's how it starts, son. You get your foot in the door, you prove what you're capable of, and you build from there." "But Dad, the pay is so low, and it doesn't even use my engineering degree." "The degree is still in your head," William replied. "And sometimes the best way to solve engineering problems is to understand them from the worker's perspective first." Neither Marcus nor William could have imagined that this temporary manufacturing position would lead to discoveries that would transform both their lives and challenge everything they thought they knew about opportunity, dignity, and the true value of different kinds of work. What Marcus didn't know was that his new job would soon intersect with a story much larger than his own employment situation, a story that would reveal that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who understand what it means to work without power. Marcus's first day at Meridian Manufacturing began at 6 a.m. on a cold Monday morning in April. He reported to the main production floor, where the noise of machinery and the smell of metal and lubricants created an environment he had studied in textbooks but never experienced firsthand. "You must be Marcus," said Sandra Martinez, the floor supervisor, a woman in her 40s with the confident demeanor of someone who had worked her way up from entry-level positions. "I'll be showing you the ropes for your first week." Marcus was assigned to a quality control station, where he would inspect automotive components for defects, a job that required attention to detail but seemed far removed from the engineering challenges he had trained for. Still, he approached the work with determination, knowing that every job was an opportunity to learn. "The key," Sandra explained as she demonstrated the inspection process, "is understanding that every part we approve affects vehicle safety. One defective component could cause an accident, so we take this responsibility seriously." As Marcus settled into his routine, he became aware of his fellow workers, men and women ranging from their 20s to their 60s, many of whom had been with Meridian for decades. They welcomed him with the practical camaraderie of people who understood that everyone was working toward the same goal. "Don't worry, college boy," joked Miguel Santos, a machinist in his 50s who worked the station next to Marcus. "We'll teach you how things really work around here." Marcus appreciated the good-natured ribbing, but he also sensed that some workers viewed him with suspicion. Another college graduate who might be looking down on manual labor while waiting for something better. On his third day, Marcus noticed something that bothered him. A new worker had started on the assembly line, an older man who seemed out of place among the younger, more experienced employees. The man worked with quiet determination, but clearly struggled with the physical demands of the job. "Who's the new guy?" Marcus asked Miguel during their lunch break. "Some guy named Bill. Says he'll work for free just to learn the job and prove himself." Management figured they couldn't lose on that deal. Marcus looked across the cafeteria and saw the older worker sitting alone, eating a simple sandwich and reading what appeared to be company policy manuals. "That's unusual, isn't it? Working for free." Miguel shrugged. "These days, people do whatever they have to do to get work. But I admire the guy's determination. Takes guts to start over at his age." That afternoon, Marcus found himself working near Bill's station and was struck by the man's methodical approach to learning the assembly process. Despite clearly being new to this type of work, Bill asked thoughtful questions and took careful notes about each step. "Excuse me," Marcus said during a brief break between production runs. "I'm Marcus. I started here earlier this week too." Bill looked up from his notes and smiled. "Bill Johnson. Nice to meet a fellow newcomer." Marcus felt a jolt of recognition. Johnson was his last name too, though he knew it was common enough that the coincidence meant nothing, but something about Bill's manner, his thoughtful way of speaking, his obvious intelligence reminded Marcus of his own father. "If you don't mind me asking," Marcus said, "what brought you to manufacturing work?" Bill considered the question carefully. "I've spent most of my career in administrative roles, but I realized I never really understood how the products I was involved with were actually made. I wanted to learn from the ground up." "And they let you work for free?" "I convinced them that having someone willing to learn without immediate compensation might be valuable. Sometimes you have to invest in your own education." Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself frequently working near Bill and was impressed by the older man's rapid learning curve and genuine respect for the skilled workers around him. Unlike some managers who occasionally toured the factory floor, Bill listened more than he spoke and asked questions that showed real interest in understanding the work. "You know," Marcus said one day as they walked to the parking lot after their shift, "you remind me of my father. He always said that honest work was dignified work, regardless of what it paid." Bill smiled. "Your father sounds like a wise man. What does he do?" "He's between jobs right now. Laid off from his last manufacturing position a few months ago. He's been struggling to find something new. That's tough. The job market is particularly challenging for experienced workers." Marcus nodded. "The worst part is seeing how it affects his confidence. He's worked his whole life, raised me on his own, put me through college. Now he's starting to doubt his own worth because some companies think he's too old or too expensive." Bill was quiet for a moment. "You know, Marcus, in my experience, the most valuable employees are often the ones who've been overlooked by others. Companies that only focus on immediate costs instead of long-term value are missing opportunities. I wish more employers thought that way. Maybe they will, if the right people are in positions to influence those decisions." That evening, Marcus returned home to find his father still at the kitchen table with job applications spread before him. William had been turned down for 3 positions that week, each rejection citing either overqualification or concerns about his age. "How was work today?" William asked, setting aside his paperwork. "Good, actually. I'm learning a lot, and there's this older guy who started the same week as me. He's working for free just to get experience, and he's got such a positive attitude about everything." William looked interested. "Working for free? That's either desperate or very strategic." "I think it's strategic. He seems really intelligent, just trying to understand the business from a different perspective." "What's his name?" "Bill Johnson. Probably no relation, despite the same last name." William froze. "Did you say Bill Johnson?" "Yeah. Why?" William stared at his son with an expression Marcus couldn't read. "Marcus, I need to tell you something. My full name isn't William Johnson. It's William Bill Johnson. I go by William professionally, but friends and family have always called me Bill." Marcus felt the room spinning around him. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that the man you've been working with, the man who's working for free to learn manufacturing, that's me. The truth hit Marcus like a physical blow. His father, the man he thought was unemployed and struggling with confidence, had somehow gotten a job at the same company, on the same floor, working right next to him. But how? Why didn't you tell me? William's expression mixed guilt with something that might have been pride. Because I wanted to understand what you were going through. Because I wanted to see if I could still contribute something valuable. And because, he paused, because I'm not actually unemployed, Marcus. I'm actually the CEO of Meridian Manufacturing. The words hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb. Marcus stared at his father, really looked at him, and suddenly saw past the work clothes and calloused hands to something he had been unconsciously ignoring his entire life. The silence in their small apartment stretched for what felt like hours as Marcus tried to process his father's revelation. The man he had known as William Johnson, unemployed factory worker, was actually William B. Johnson, CEO of Meridian Manufacturing, the company where Marcus had been struggling to prove himself worthy of an entry-level position. Marcus, let me explain, William began. Explain what? Marcus interrupted, his voice rising with a mixture of anger and confusion. Explain how you've been lying to me my entire life. Explain how you let me stress about finding work at your own company. Explain how you watch me take a job for $18 an hour when you could have just, what? Given me a corner office. William sat back in his chair, the weight of 24 years of carefully maintained deception evident in his expression. It's not that simple, son. Then make it simple for me, Dad. Or should I call you Mr. Johnson now? William flinched at the formal address. Marcus, please, I'm still your father. Everything about our relationship has been real, really, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like everything has been a performance. William stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the neighborhood where they had lived for Marcus's entire childhood. Do you remember when you were 8 years old, and you asked me why we lived in this apartment instead of a big house like some of your classmates? You said we lived where we could afford to live, Marcus replied warily. And that was true, not because I didn't have money, but because I wanted you to understand what most people's lives were actually like. I wanted you to grow up with the values that my father taught me when I was working factory jobs to pay for business school. Marcus felt his anger wavering, replaced by deeper confusion. So everything we've experienced, the tight budgets, the second-hand clothes, working multiple jobs to pay for my college. I worked those jobs because I wanted to remember what it felt like to depend on hourly wages. The tight budgets were real because I only used the money I earned from those jobs to support our household. Everything else from Meridian went into trusts and community investment programs. Community investment programs. William turned back to face his son. Marcus, Meridian Manufacturing employs over 3,000 people. Every decision I make affects thousands of families. I never wanted to lose sight of what those decisions mean to real people, living real lives. Marcus sank into his chair as the implications began to hit him. So when I interviewed for the engineering position, Jennifer Walsh had no idea who you were. The hiring decision was made by the engineering department based solely on qualifications and interview performance. But you knew I was applying. I knew, but I didn't interfere. I wanted you to succeed or fail based on your own merit, just like every other candidate. And the temporary position, the $18 an hour job, William's expression grew more serious. That was also a legitimate offer. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I took that job working beside you because I wanted to see how our entry-level employees are actually treated. I wanted to understand if the policies I approve from the executive level translate into dignity and respect on the factory floor. Marcus thought about the past few weeks, about the way Bill Johnson had been received by the workers, about the questions he asked, and the respect he showed for everyone's contributions. What did you learn? I learned that some of our supervisors are excellent leaders who truly care about their teams. I learned that some of our policies sound good on paper, but create unnecessary stress for workers. And I learned that my son has the character and work ethic to succeed anywhere, regardless of his last name or my position. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Dad, why are you telling me this now? Because tomorrow, The engineering department is announcing a permanent position opening, a role specifically focused on improving manufacturing processes based on direct floor experience. It's a position that requires both engineering knowledge and hands-on understanding of production work, and you think I should apply? I think you're uniquely qualified for it. But more than that, I think you've earned it through your work. These past weeks, not through any connection to me. Marcus looked around their modest apartment with new eyes. How long were you planning to keep this secret originally? I thought until you were established in your own career. But working beside you these past weeks, seeing how you interact with colleagues, watching you solve problems, I realized you don't need my protection anymore. You need my honesty. What about the other workers, Miguel, Sandra, everyone who's been training me? William smiled for the first time since the conversation began. They're going to be very interested to learn that the new guy who's been working for free is the same person who signs their paychecks, but I think they'll also understand why I did it. And my co-workers, who know me as Marcus Johnson, they'll learn that Marcus Johnson, quality control inspector, is the same person whether his father is a factory worker or a CEO. Your character doesn't change based on my job title. That evening, as Marcus lay in bed trying to process the day's revelations, he realized that his father's deception had been motivated not by shame or manipulation, but by a desire to ensure that Marcus understood the value of work and the dignity of every person who contributed to creating something meaningful. The next morning would bring new challenges navigating relationships with co-workers, who would soon learn his true identity, deciding whether to pursue the engineering position, and figuring out how to maintain the authentic connections he had built while working as just another temporary employee. But for the first time in months, Marcus felt like he understood not just where he was going, but why the journey mattered. His father had given him something more valuable than an executive position or family wealth. He had given him the knowledge that success meant something only when it was built on respect for everyone who contributed to achieving it. The question now was whether Marcus could use that knowledge to build a career that honored both his education and his understanding of what work really meant to the people who did it every day. 6 months after William's revelation, Meridian Manufacturing was buzzing with changes that reflected a new approach to leadership and employee development. Marcus had not only secured the engineering position focused on process improvement, but he had become a bridge between management and the factory floor in ways that surprised everyone, including himself. The efficiency improvements we've implemented, based on worker feedback, have increased productivity by 15%, while reducing workplace injuries by 30%. Marcus reported to the executive team during his first formal presentation as a junior engineer. William sat at the conference table, no longer hiding his pride in his son's accomplishments. The revelation of their relationship had initially caused some controversy among employees, who wondered if Marcus had received unfair advantages. But 6 months of consistent performance and genuine collaboration had settled most concerns. The key insight, Marcus continued, was that the workers who perform these tasks every day have solutions that engineering studies miss. We just needed systems to capture and implement their knowledge. Jennifer Walsh, who had initially hired Marcus for the temporary position, nodded approvingly. The feedback from the floor supervisors has been overwhelmingly positive. They feel heard in ways they haven't experienced before. After the meeting, Marcus walked through the factory floor, where he now split his time between engineering projects and hands-on production work. The hybrid role had been William's innovation, recognizing that the best solutions came from understanding both the technical and human aspects of manufacturing. "Hey, college boy," called Miguel Santos from his machining station. "How's life? In the front office treating you?" "Still spending half my time out here where the real work happens," Marcus replied with a grin. Miguel had been one of the most skeptical workers when Marcus's family connection was revealed, but he had become one of his strongest supporters after seeing that Marcus continued to work alongside hourly employees and advocate for their ideas in management meetings. "You know," Miguel said, "when I first heard your dad was the CEO, I figured you'd be running the company within a year. And now I think you might actually earn it the right way." That afternoon, Marcus found his father in his executive office, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed Meridian's strongest performance in 5 years. "The board is impressed with the productivity improvements," William said, looking up from his computer. "They're asking if we can replicate this model at our other facilities. What do you think?" "I think we've proven that the best leadership happens when you understand the work from every level. But Marcus, I need to ask you something important." Marcus settled into the chair across from his father's desk, a conversation that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "I'm 53 years old, and I've been running this company for 8 years. I'm starting to think about succession planning, about ensuring Meridian continues to prioritize both profitability and employee welfare after I retire. And I want to know if you're interested in a leadership track that would prepare you to eventual. Why run this company? Not because you're my son, but because you've demonstrated the kind of values and understanding that Meridian needs in its future leadership." Marcus was quiet for several minutes, considering the magnitude of what his father was proposing. What would that look like? 5 years of rotating through every department, including international operations. You'd work in sales, finance, human resources, supply chain management, and advanced engineering. You'd understand this business from every angle, and you'd earn the respect of every employee you might someday lead. And if I'm not cut out for it, William smiled, then you'll have gained incredible experience and knowledge that will make you valuable anywhere you choose to work. But Marcus, I've watched you for 6 months now. You have the technical skills, the emotional intelligence, and the work ethic to lead this company into the future." That evening, Marcus sat in the apartment he still shared with his father, contemplating an offer that would change the trajectory of his entire life. The modest surroundings that had once embarrassed him now felt like a reminder of the values that had shaped him. "Dad," Marcus said over dinner, "if I take this leadership track, I want to maintain our living arrangement for at least another year." William looked surprised. "You want to keep living here?" "I want to remember what it feels like to live on a working person's salary, even when I'm learning to make decisions that affect thousands of working people. I think that perspective is important. And after that, I'd like to move to a neighborhood where Meridian employees live. I want to understand the communities that depend on this company, not just the boardroom perspectives." William felt pride swell in his chest. His son had learned the lesson he had spent 24 years trying to teach, that leadership meant service, not privilege. 1 year later, Marcus was featured on the cover of Manufacturing Today magazine as an example of next generation leadership that bridges the gap between management and labor. The article highlighted Meridian's innovative approach to employee engagement and its industry-leading combination of profitability and worker satisfaction. "The secret," Marcus was quoted as saying, "is that there shouldn't be a gap between management and labor in the first place. We're all working toward the same goal, and the best solutions come from listening to everyone who contributes to achieving that goal." The article included a photograph of Marcus working alongside Miguel Santos on a new efficiency project. Both men focused on a complex mechanical problem that required both engineering knowledge and practical experience to solve. William kept a copy of the magazine in his office, not as a monument to his son's success, but as a reminder that the most important inheritance he could provide was not wealth or position, but the understanding that true leadership meant never forgetting where you came from or whom you served. As Marcus continued his leadership development, rotating through different departments and learning the business from every angle, he carried with him the lessons learned during those early weeks, when he thought he was just a temporary worker, trying to prove himself worthy of a permanent position. He had discovered that worthiness wasn't something you proved through credentials or connections. It was something you demonstrated every day through your commitment to the success and dignity of everyone around you. The father who had worked for free to understand his employees' experiences had given his son something more valuable than a company. He had given him the knowledge that the best leaders are those who never stop learning from the people they serve.